This is the all-new 5th generation Kia Sportage. And it's kind of like seeing an old friend who's really made something of themselves, because the previous generation Sportage was one of Kia's best sellers, but it was just a little bit dull and a tad boring. And now it's got a brand new premium look to it that kind of backs up the Sportage's prestige. And Kia hopes that it will help take on the likes of the Skoda Karoq and Ford Kuga, to name but a few. So today I'm going to find out whether you should actually go out and buy a Kia Sportage. But before I go any further, if you like what we do, why not give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. First off, we're going to talk about the way this thing looks, because the new Sportage is a seriously striking car, and it's all highlighted by these LED headlights that, when they're lit up at night, just gives the car this real mean look. There's a lot more aggression in the Sportage than on its predecessor. There's also a much slimmer tiger nose grille, although we've got a lot more venting below that. Plus, this is the GT line, so we have a body colour strip at the base of it. If you go for the regular model, that actually comes in silver. Now, above the tiger nose, we have the new Kia badge, which personally I think looks a hell of a lot better than the old one and just gives it more of that premium feel. At the back, it's a bit more of a mixed bag. The boot lid is very flat and from some angles can make the car look really quite hefty, but overall, it's a very premium look. Now, also the design depends on which package that you go for. So we've got the GT line here, which means that you get slightly sportier looks, particularly down at the base of the bumper. And you also get a lot more body color elements as well, particularly down the side of the car. Whereas on the entry-level cars, there's a lot more plastic cladding to give it more of that off-roadery look. You also get some silver highlights down at the base of the car and also at the rear, again, to make it look as though you could go soft-roading, although I personally wouldn't recommend it. The base car, though, comes with more black plastic cladding around the base and the sides of the car, and it's all to give it more of that rugged look, just in case you want to go soft-roading. Wheels come in 17, 18 and 19 inches. The one that we have here is the mid-range 18. And on top spec cars, there's also the option of a two-tone paint job, with the bottom of the car being a colour of your choice and the roof being in gloss black. It's certainly a very sophisticated looking car, but there's a lot more to the Sportage than just a very successful makeover. It's built on an all-new production platform, which comes with a 10mm increase in the wheelbase, also the height and the car's width. The overall length, though, has been increased by 30mm. Now, you might be watching this from outside of Europe and thinking, that doesn't sound quite right. And you'd be correct. And that's because there are two versions of the Sportage. There's the global car, which is considered as the long wheelbase version, and the European car, which is considered the short wheelbase car. And no matter which box you ticked back in 2016, the UK is part of Europe, and therefore we get the short wheelbase car. The good news is the car has been engineered for European roads, which are notoriously terrible compared to other places in the world. Inside, there has been a major makeover, and it just feels so much more premium than the old car. One of the highlights is this vent system, which has got this silver surround to it that looks as though it's been plucked straight from the Kia Sorento, the Sportage's bigger sibling. And if you want to watch my review of that, then just click the link in the top right-hand corner. We've also got a gloss black center console, which is going to pick up fingerprints like there's no tomorrow. But the good news is you have a selection of physical buttons, so it's not just all done on the touchscreen, which is a big win in my book. This is the GT line, so you get a slightly sporty steering wheel with GT line at the base, and also a nice mix of physical buttons, which are really nicely damped as well, so they don't feel all cheap. And this being the top spec GT line S, we get sport seats with faux leather in the center and suede at the side, and you also get these suede inserts on the door, which feels very sporty. But the big highlight is the twin displays. So we've got in this car a 12.3-inch panel in the center, which controls the infotainment system. And I honestly think it's one of the best infotainment systems there currently is. Not only does it look good with the blue and purple design, but it also comes with quite a few features. So we've got a menu for the hybrid setting, so we can have a look and see our efficiency while on the go. There's a quiet mode, which will only play sound out of the front speakers and limit the volume to 25% for when you want a relaxing drive. And best of all, it comes with my favorite feature that you'll find in a Kia or a Hyundai or a Genesis, because they're all part of the same group, and that is the Sounds of Nature app. Because there's nothing better than when you're driving along and you can blast out the sound of a lively forest. Yeah. You can also get a 12.3-inch digital cockpit, which on higher models comes with a really cool feature where when you're indicating, it'll actually show you your blind spot in one of the 2 virtual dials. And finally, something that I really like, we were talking about the physical buttons earlier, but you do get this really cool little adaptable display. So that gives you some digital shortcuts to the infotainment system, or you can swap it on the fly to the climate controls, which is very clever. Now, prices start at £26,000, which is actually a little bit more than the outgoing Sportage. And it's also worth noting that if you go for the very base spec cars, you get a smaller infotainment screen as well as a smaller virtual cockpit. In fact, it's only really the mid-range models of where both of those 12.3-inch panels come in as standard kit. And if you wanted to go for the absolute top spec GT Line S that we have here with the suede interior and the memory seats, then you're going to be looking at a price over £40,000. That does mean that the Skoda Karoq is actually a slightly cheaper alternative, but again, that's before you start ticking options, and it's about on par with the Ford Kuga. Now, if you want to watch my review of the Ford Kuga, then click the link in the top right-hand corner and check out my extremely awkward and long lockdown hair. It's pretty spacious in the back of the Sportage. We've got plenty of knee room, and while headroom is actually a little bit more of a squeeze, that's primarily because we've got the panoramic roof, which always cuts into headspace. So if you go without that, then you should open up just a little bit more room. But me being just under 6 foot, I fit in here absolutely fine. Now, at the moment, I feel like I'm sat upright a little bit too much. However, you can actually recline the rear seats if you fancy something a little bit more leisurely. And we've also got an armrest with a couple of cup holders, climate controls in the back here, plus there are USB-C chargers, and they're integrated into the seats in front of you, which is dead cool. Right, onto engines. Now, unless you're after a massive V8 or a full-blown EV, then Kia's pretty much got you covered with the new Sportage. Now, on the petrol side, it all starts off with a 1.6-litre engine producing 148 horsepower. Now, you can get that with either a 6-speed manual or a 7-speed DSG. It also comes in front or all-wheel drive form, and you can also get one with a 48-volt mild hybrid system. Now, if you want something a little less mild, you can go for the car that we have here, which is the self-charging hybrid. Now, it uses the same motor, plus comes with an electric system as well that bumps up the power to 226 horsepower, and crucially will give you some electric only running at lower speeds. And as the name suggests, you don't need to plug it in, the car will just charge itself up. Now, if you want to do longer stints on electric power, then you'll want to go for the plug-in hybrid. Now, it's not available yet, it doesn't launch until spring 2022, but we know it's got 261 horsepower, and while we don't have an official figure yet for the electric range, I'd expect somewhere in the region of around 35 miles. Now, the self-charging hybrid and the plug-in hybrid come with a 6-speed automatic gearbox and all-wheel drive. And I'm not done just yet either, because there's a couple of diesels. They're both based around a 1.6-litre engine, but one produces 113 horsepower and the other 134. And like the petrols, you can choose either a 6-speed manual or 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox. Right, I think that's everything covered. I've got some good news and some slightly less good news. Now, the good news is, no matter which model of the Sportage you go for, boot space has been increased over the old car. The amount of which, though, depends on which model you go for. So if you go for the entry-level bog standard petrol model, you get the biggest boot at 591 litres, which is around 100 litres more than the old car. But if you go for a diesel hybrid, a mild hybrid, you get the smallest boot at 526 litres. There is some storage underneath the boot floor, plus you get these little pull levers either side of the boot, which will lower the seats for you without you having to clamber in the back and do it manually. And overall, the boot is still way bigger than what you get on a Nissan Qashqai. And you can watch my review of the Nissan Qashqai by clicking the link in the top right-hand corner. Now, the car I'm in at the moment is the self-charging hybrid. And while I've been driving around this little cul-de-sac, I've actually been able to do quite a bit of it on the battery power. And the great thing about a self-charging hybrid is that it's all done automatically for you. So it's when you're pottering around at low speeds like I am at the moment, it'll just intermittently cut in with the electric motor and give you just short bursts of silent running. Now, the only downside is that you don't have any control over that. The computer does it all for you. But in all fairness, when you're just driving around town, it does make the driving experience just a lot more leisurely and easy to drive. And while this is the GT line, there's nothing really sporty about the way this thing drives. It is, for all intents and purposes, a very easy and very relaxing driving experience. For example, the steering is really very light, particularly right in the center. Now, when you wind a little bit more lock on, it does get heavier, but I wouldn't really say that's to give you a sporty feel. It's more just to really prevent you from doing really hard turns from left to right. It does mean, though, that at the center of the steering wheel, when you do make some very small adjustments, because it's so light and can feel almost a little bit loose, you find that the car does change direction just a little bit faster than you might want it to. And there's just an element of vagueness about it. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a European setup on this car, so it should theoretically be able to handle really, really rough roads with ease. And for the most part, that is the case. The new Sportage is really very comfortable. We've got the 18-inch rims, so if you go for the 19s, you might find you might get a little bit more shocks coming through the cabin, but on the 18s, everything feels relatively soft and smooth. Now, what's really interesting about this as well is that we've got the 6-speed automatic gearbox with the hybrid system. Now, a lot of cars that come with self-charging hybrids are usually some form of CVT, which means that it's one variable gear. Whereas on here, we've got obviously 6 gears to choose from, and it does mean that when you put your foot down, it can get just a little bit noisy. And when you put your foot down, you've got the electric motor that kicks in and gives you a little bit of a shove. Like I said, this is not a sporty car, so at no point does it feel like you're going to be going really quickly. But not only is 226 odd horsepower decent enough, you get near instant torque with an electric motor, so it does feel a lot nippier than maybe the numbers would suggest. And a lot of that power comes low down as well, so 0 to 30 of this car feels pretty damn nippy. If you do want a bit more of a kick though, there is a sport mode, which makes it feel a little bit nippier, but again, it's not going to transform it into a hot SUV. There's also terrain modes as well. So we do have an all-wheel drive system in this particular car, so it can do some slippery surfaces. And the different modes that we've got are snow, mud, and sand. So if you find yourself in snowy, muddy, or sandy conditions, the new Kia Sportage should have you covered if you find yourself getting a bit stuck. Now, on this particular model as well, we have some semi-autonomous driving modes. So I do have a steering assist on, which will keep me in the center of my lane, and that can work with adaptive cruise control as well to give me some form of semi-autonomous driving. And on long journeys, and when you take it on a motorway, it does feel really smooth, and it does keep you in the center of your lane. However, when you're kind of pottering around these kind of smaller roads, back roads, and going through cul-de-sacs and the like of that, sometimes the steering assist can get a little bit confused, and there's a few times where I just find myself kind of having to tug the car in another direction to make sure that it stays in the center of its lane. Now, I know some of you are going to think like, well, only use it on the motorway then. But you'll find that some German cars actually have really nailed this technology now, and you can use it pretty much wherever you go if you're cruising along. But on the Kia, it doesn't feel quite as refined as admittedly more expensive rivals from the German brands. Now, there are cheaper alternatives out there, the Nissan Qashqai and the Skoda Karoq, to name a few, but the Kia brings something that a lot of its rivals don't do, and that's an air of sophistication, really, really great quality, and all at a price that won't break the bank.